He came to carry chairs.
That pin is copper, Nathan, not gold. I suppose even nostalgia has a budget. Celeste Price said it loudly enough for the nearest reunion table to hear. A few old classmates laughed into their wine glasses. Above them, the Academy Hall glowed with chandeliers, class photographs, and brass plaques bearing the names of wealthy donors. Nathan Price stood beside a stack of folded banquet chairs. At 55, he wore a plain, black service jacket. The small class pin on his lapel had darkened around the edges, its copper face worn smooth by decades of touch. Celeste raised her glass. Some of us came back as donors, she said. Nathan came back to carry chairs. The laughter spread. Nathan did not answer. At the far end of the hall, walnut doors remained closed beneath a discreet plaque, Alumni Board Suite. Behind them waited the Academy treasurer, a leather-bound ledger, 12 sealed ballots, and a vote that would decide the next alumni president before dessert. Celeste knew that. What she did not know was why the man she had mistaken for a porter kept checking the clock above the stage. Still wearing the old scholarship pin, she asked. She reached toward his lapel. Nathan caught her wrist before her fingers touched it. He did not squeeze. He simply held her hand still. Her smile thinned. "Don't," he said. One quiet word. The nearest conversation stopped. Celeste pulled free and laughed as if he had embarrassed himself. "Oh, please, it's a class trinket." "No," Nathan said. "It isn't." For half a second, the copper pin caught the chandelier light. Beneath the Academy crest were two tiny letters nearly erased by time. SF. Scholarship Fund, Celeste announced to the table. Nathan was one of the charity boys. That little pin was how the school reminded them to be grateful. The room shifted into uneasy silence. Celeste mistook it for permission. She motioned toward the chairs. "The staff still needs 6 along the west wall, unless you've been promoted since cocktail hour." A silver-haired trustee lowered his eyes. Nathan glanced toward the board suite. The walnut doors opened. Treasurer Martin Hale appeared holding a thick, dark ledger against his chest. He scanned the hall, found Nathan, and gave the smallest nod. Celeste saw it, but recovered quickly. "Martin," she called, "we were helping Nathan find where he belongs." Martin did not smile. "The board is ready," he said. Celeste lifted her chin, expecting him to address her. She had spent a year cultivating the donors' circle, hosting private lunches, and telling anyone who listened that the presidency needed someone with polish. Instead, Martin kept his eyes on Nathan. Nathan released the chair. Its metal legs struck the floor with a sharp crack. He adjusted the old pin, crossed the hall, and walked past Celeste toward the board suite. No one laughed now. "Nathan," she called. He stopped at the threshold. Behind Martin, the boardroom table sat beneath green-shaded lamps. At its center lay the endowment ledger open to a page marked with a blue ribbon. Beside it rested a single memorandum bearing the Academy seal. Nathan faced Celeste. "You told them I came here to carry chairs," he said. "Let's see what the record says." A donor near the stage slowly rose. Then another. Celeste's hand tightened around her glass. She still believed this was a misunderstanding she could charm away. She still believed reputation could outrun a written record. And she had no idea that before the vote ended, the role she had spent years building would be the first thing taken from her. But to understand why an anonymous man had rebuilt an Academy's future and why he had erased his own name from the work. We have to go back 7 years to the night Nathan Price learned the scholarship fund was 30 days from collapse. 7 years earlier, Nathan Price began most mornings before the financial district filled with noise. He lived alone in a narrow Princeton apartment above a locksmith shop 3 miles from the Academy. At 5:30, he brewed coffee, opened the market reports on an old laptop, and studied the numbers while delivery trucks rattled along the street below. His clients knew him as a quiet advisor who helped universities and charitable foundations protect long-term funds. He rarely attended ceremonies. He refused photographs, avoided public panels, and asked that his name be left off every annual report he touched. By 7, he was usually walking through the Academy's East Gate. He never entered through the main administration building. Instead, he used the service path beside the gymnasium where students hurried past without recognizing him. The copper pin stayed beneath his coat. Nathan had received it at 17 after arriving at the Academy with 2 shirts, a borrowed suitcase, and a scholarship that covered everything his mother could not. She had worked nights cleaning offices in Trenton. On the day he graduated, she polished the pin with the corner of her handkerchief and fastened it to his jacket herself. They may remember who paid for the building she had told him, but you remember who opened the door. Nathan had worn it at her funeral 12 years later. I had not polished it since. That November morning, he entered a small records room beneath the Academy library. Martin Hale was waiting beside a metal desk crowded with budget folders. Martin had been the Academy treasurer for 23 years. He was careful with language, cautious with emotion, and too proud to ask for help until the danger had become impossible to hide. He locked the door after Nathan entered. How bad, Nathan asked. Martin slid a single page across the desk. The scholarship fund had once supported 48 students each year. It was now projected to cover 19. By the following fall, even that number would be uncertain. A failed investment partnership had trapped part of the endowment. Several longtime donors had redirected their giving toward buildings that could carry their names. Operating costs had risen while the fund responsible for tuition assistance had been quietly drained to meet other obligations. Nathan read the page twice. When does the board announce the cuts? 30 days. And the students? They'll receive non-renewal notices before Christmas. Nathan's thumb moved across the worn edge of his pin beneath his coat. 19 students were not numbers to him. They were 19 families waiting for a door to remain open. Why bring this to me, he asked, though he already understood. Martin opened a drawer and removed a thin folder containing Nathan's old scholarship file. Inside was a handwritten recommendation from a mathematics teacher, a tuition waiver, and a copy of the renewal memo that had allowed Nathan to remain at the academy after his mother became ill during his second year. Without that memo, he would have left school at 16 to work full-time. The board wants a rescue campaign, Martin said. A gala newspaper coverage naming rights. They think embarrassment will make wealthy alumni compete. It might. For a year. Nathan studied the projection again. Then the same structure fails. Martin gave a weary nod. Nathan spent the next 3 hours tracing the fund's decline through old reports. He found overlapping management fees, short-term withdrawals disguised as temporary transfers, and donor restrictions so narrow that millions sat untouched while scholarship accounts weakened. There was no theft, no dramatic crime, just years of decisions made by people who valued visible prestige over invisible stability that made the damage harder to explain and easier to repeat. Nathan began writing on the back of the projection sheet. He proposed separating scholarship assets from general operating funds, renegotiating management fees, consolidating underperforming accounts, and creating a renewal reserve that could not be borrowed for construction. It was patient work, uncelebrated work, exactly the kind Nathan trusted. Martin, read the notes. The board won't accept this from an outsider. Then don't tell them it came from one. Nathan, present the structure. Leave my name out. Martin removed his glasses. You could build a public campaign around this. Alumni would listen to you. Nathan closed the old scholarship file. They would listen to the story, he said. Then they would congratulate themselves for caring. He tapped the financial projection. I need them to follow the plan after the applause ends. Martin studied him for a long moment. And what do you want in return? Nathan slid the renewal memo back into its folder. No student who has met the academic standard receives a cancellation letter this year. That guarantee will require money before the restructuring works. I know. Nathan had spent 20 years building a modest private investment firm, then sold his share after his mother's death. He lived carefully, kept no second home, and avoided the social world his former classmates considered proof of success. Most of the sale proceeds remained untouched. He had told himself they were for retirement. Now he knew they had been waiting for a purpose. I can cover the renewal reserve, he said, but the gift stays anonymous. Martin's chair creaked beneath him. You understand what you're offering? Yes. It could be several $1,000,000. Nathan fastened his coat. It could be 19 futures. Before he left, Martin placed the copper pin on the desk. Nathan had not realized it had slipped free while they worked. Under the harsh records room light, it appeared almost worthless. Martin lifted it carefully. The academy stopped issuing these years ago. That doesn't mean the promise expired. Nathan pinned it back beneath his coat and walked out through the service corridor. By lunchtime, the board had received an emergency proposal from an unnamed strategist. By evening, Martin had begun preparing the first scholarship renewal memo, and across town Celeste Price heard that the academy was facing a financial crisis. She had been divorced from Nathan for 6 years, but she still followed the alumni donor lists closely. To Celeste, every crisis was also a stage, and she intended to be standing at the center when the curtain rose. Celeste Price understood institutions the way some people understood weather. She knew which rooms mattered, which names opened them, and how quickly admiration could be manufactured if the right people saw you standing beside the right cause. Within 2 weeks of hearing about the Academy's financial trouble, she had joined the Alumni Donor Committee. By spring, she was hosting private breakfasts for trustees. By summer, her photograph appeared in the Alumni magazine beside a headline about preserving opportunity for future generations. Celeste spoke often about scholarships. She never mentioned that Nathan had once needed one. Their marriage had ended 6 years earlier after she told him that his refusal to display success made them appear unsuccessful. Nathan had been invited to advise a regional foundation that year. Celeste wanted a public announcement, a formal photograph, and a reception where she could introduce him as the man controlling nearly $500 million in charitable assets. Nathan declined all three. "You spend your life helping powerful people protect their names," she had said, "and somehow you still don't understand the value of your own." I understood it. He simply did not share her definition. After the divorce, Celeste kept the house, the social memberships, and most of their mutual friends. Nathan kept his old records, his mother's handkerchief, and the copper pin. To their classmates, the arrangement seemed to confirm what Celeste quietly suggested: she had outgrown him. Nathan never corrected them. While she built her donor circle image, he worked with Martin Hale in private. The restructuring began with resistance. Several trustees disliked the idea of separating scholarship assets from general funds. One warned that restricted reserves would limit the board's flexibility. Another argued that donors preferred new buildings because they could see what their money purchased. Nathan attended those meetings through a secure audio connection introduced only as an external consultant. He listened while men whose names appeared on gymnasiums complained that scholarship students produced no visible legacy. Then he spoke. "A building can carry your name after it stops serving its purpose," Nathan said. "A student carries the purpose after your name is forgotten." The proposal passed by 1 vote. Celeste claimed partial credit before the week ended. At an alumni luncheon, she praised the committee's bold new scholarship strategy and accepted congratulations for helping the Academy reconsider its priorities. Martin heard about the speech and called Nathan that evening. "Doesn't it bother you?" Nathan was seated at his kitchen table reviewing the first quarter after the restructuring. The new fee agreements were already saving the Academy more than $400,000 annually. The reserve he had funded had protected every scholarship renewal. "No," Nathan said. "She is using your work to position herself for the donor circle chair. If the work survives, the position doesn't matter." Martin sighed. "It matters to people who control votes." That proved true. Over the next 5 years, Celeste became the polished public face of the scholarship campaign. She appeared at dinners, ribbon cuttings, and student award ceremonies. Nathan attended none of them. He continued rebuilding the endowment from behind the ledger. He shifted the portfolio away from expensive prestige funds and into a disciplined structure designed around long-term scholarship obligations. He persuaded 3 anonymous alumni to create matching reserves. He established a rule requiring every major capital campaign to include a fixed percentage for tuition assistance. The fund recovered slowly. Then it grew. 19 protected students became 31. 31 became 46. By the 5th year, the Academy could renew every existing scholarship and offer 8 additional places without touching emergency reserves. Nathan asked Martin to keep his name out of every public report. Martin agreed, but he preserved the internal record. Each strategy note, contribution, and approved revision was entered into the Alumni Endowment Ledger under a confidential designation NP Trust Advisor. Only the treasurer and 2 board officers knew what the initials meant. Celeste came close to finding out during the 6th year. She entered Martin's office without an appointment while he was preparing the annual donor report. The ledger lay open across his desk. "What is NP?" she asked. Martin closed the cover. "A confidential advisor. An advisor who votes. No, an advisor who donates." Martin adjusted his glasses. "Some information is protected by donor instruction." Celeste rested one hand on the ledger. "The donor circle cannot cultivate people it is forbidden to identify. This person does not want cultivation. Everyone wants recognition. Not everyone." Her expression tightened. Celeste had begun privately campaigning to become alumni president. The position carried no salary, but it offered access to trustees, wealthy graduates, and every major fundraising decision. An unknown advisor with influence over the endowment represented something she could not tolerate: authority she could not flatter, display, or control. "Is Nathan involved?" she asked. Martin's pause lasted less than a second. "It was enough." Celeste laughed. "Nathan could barely sit through a donor dinner." "That was not my answer." "No, but it was close." She left, convinced that her ex-husband had probably reviewed a few spreadsheets as a professional courtesy. In her mind, he remained what he had always been: technically useful, socially invisible, and unwilling to claim a place among important people. She did not imagine he had supplied the first emergency reserve. She did not know that the fund's recovery model was his. And she never considered that the initials she had seen might become more powerful than every name printed on the academy walls. Nathan had his own reason for remaining silent. The scholarship program was approaching a dangerous transition. Martin planned to retire after the upcoming reunion, and several trustees wanted to loosen the reserve rules once he left. One proposal would allow the board to borrow from scholarship assets to renovate the reunion hall. Another would replace need-based renewals with awards targeted at students whose families could later become donors. Nathan could walk away and preserve his anonymity. But if he did, the system he had rebuilt might be dismantled within a year. 3 months before the reunion, Martin placed the proposed changes in front of him. "The next alumni president will influence which version reaches the board," he said. "Nathan, read the names of the likely candidates." Celeste's was at the top. "She has 9 votes," Martin continued. "Possibly 10. How many are needed?" 12. Nathan closed the proposal. For years, he had believed good structures should not depend on good people. Now he faced the opposite truth: even the strongest rules could be undone by someone who valued reputation more than legacy. "What are you asking me to do?" he said. Martin opened the endowment ledger to the pages bearing Nathan's initials. "Stop hiding long enough to protect what you built." Nathan's fingers settled over the copper pin beneath his shirt. He had no interest in applause titles or returning to the social world Celeste controlled. But the latest scholarship renewal memo listed 54 students, 54 doors that could close. He read every name before giving Martin his answer. "Put me on the ballot." Nathan's name appeared on the reunion ballot 6 weeks before the dinner. By noon, Celeste had called Martin Hale twice. By 3, she was standing inside the treasurer's office with the candidate list folded in her hand. "This has to be a mistake." Martin continued signing scholarship renewal letters. "It isn't. Nathan hasn't attended an alumni meeting in years. Hun met the eligibility requirements. I doesn't have a donor circle role. That isn't required." Celeste placed the ballot on his desk. "He has no public record of service to the academy." Martin's pen paused. "Public record," he repeated. Celeste heard the distinction but did not understand it. She believed Nathan had entered the race out of pride. Perhaps he had learned she was the leading candidate and wanted to embarrass her. Perhaps this was his delayed attempt to prove that their divorce had not left him behind. Either explanation made more sense to her than the truth. "I won't receive 3 votes, she said. Martin returned to the renewal letters. "Then you have nothing to worry about." But Celeste did worry. She began calling trustees that evening. To some, she described Nathan as a respected financial technician who lacked the social instincts required for leadership. To others, she suggested that he had become resentful since their divorce. She never openly attacked his scholarship background. She simply reminded wealthy classmates that Nathan had always seemed uncomfortable around donors. The message was polite and effective. He did not belong at the head of their table. Nathan refused to campaign against her. When Martin sent him a schedule of alumni receptions, Nathan declined every invitation except the final candidates meeting. "You need to be visible," Martin warned. "I need the scholarship protections to survive. The voters need to know why that matters to you." They have the numbers. Celeste is giving them a story. Nathan studied the proposed amendment that would allow temporary borrowing from the scholarship reserve. Then I'll give them a decision. At the candidates' meeting, Celeste arrived with printed brochures bearing her photograph and the slogan, Tradition with Vision. Nathan carried one folder. 8 alumni representatives sat around the conference table. Several had already promised Celeste their votes. She spoke first. Her plan included expanded reunions, regional donor events, a renovated alumni lounge, and a campaign honoring families who had supported the Academy across generations. She delivered every line smoothly. When Nathan's turn came, he placed copies of the reserve amendment before each representative. If this passes, he said, the Academy can remove up to $8 million from scholarship protection and classify it as an internal loan. A former class officer skimmed the first page. The money would be repaid. There is no repayment deadline. It funds improvements that attract future donors. It funds a hall renovation. Celeste smiled. A hall used to raise money for students. Nathan opened his folder. The Academy raised more scholarship contributions before the last renovation than after it. Her smile held. You're reducing leadership to a spreadsheet. No, I'm refusing to hide a choice inside one. A chair shifted near the window. Nathan explained how the amendment could affect renewal commitments during a market decline. He used no dramatic language. He simply showed what would happen if the fund lost value while millions remained tied up in construction. One representative frowned. How do you know the reserve structure this well? Celeste answered before Nathan could. He advises endowments professionally. That doesn't mean he understands this community. Nathan let the interruption stand. Revealing his role early might win support, but it would also turn the vote into a contest over personal credit. He wanted the representatives to decide whether scholarship money was protected because it was right, not because the man asking had secretly rescued it. The meeting ended without a commitment. Outside the conference room, Celeste caught up with him beside the service elevator. You always do this, she said. Nathan pressed the call button. Do what? Walk into a room, make everyone feel irresponsible, then pretend you don't care what they think. I showed them an amendment. You showed them a disaster because fear is the only way you know how to persuade people. The elevator doors opened, but Nathan did not enter. You proposed using scholarship reserves for a reunion hall. I proposed investing in alumni loyalty, with money promised to students. Celeste's voice dropped. You still think being one of them makes you noble. Nathan's hand paused near his lapel. One of whom? The students who arrive grateful and spend the rest of their lives resenting the people who paid. The corridor seemed smaller after she said it. Nathan had heard careless versions of that belief before. Never from someone who had once watched his mother count grocery money at their kitchen table. Celeste recognized the hurt and pressed harder. You want the presidency to prove you were never beneath us. No, Nathan said. I want the presidency because you still believe there is an US. He entered the elevator and left her standing alone. 2 days later, the practical threat arrived. The board's governance committee ruled that anonymous service could not be included in candidate biographies without supporting documentation. Nathan's official profile would list only his graduation year profession and limited public participation. Celeste's profile filled 2 pages. Martin read the ruling in disbelief. They're erasing 7 years. They can't erase the fund. They can make sure no one knows you rebuilt it. Nathan folded the decision and placed it inside his folder. Who requested the ruling? Martin did not need to answer. Celeste had found the rule she could weaponize without ever mentioning Nathan's past. Unless he authorized the release of his confidential records, his work would remain invisible. If he released them, she would accuse him of exploiting anonymous gifts for political gain. Either choice could damage the institution he meant to protect. That evening, Nathan visited the Academy Library after closing. On the lower floor, 54 scholarship renewal memos waited in labeled envelopes. Some students had already received theirs. Others would be mailed after the board confirmed the coming year's budget. Nathan selected one copy from the administrative file. The wording was almost identical to the memo that had kept him in school decades earlier. Your scholarship has been renewed based on academic standing and demonstrated need. He remembered carrying that sentence home to his mother. She had read it twice, sat down at the kitchen table, and covered her face with both hands. No applause, no donor photograph, just one family allowed to breathe again. Martin found Nathan beside the records cabinet. "The latest count gives Celeste 10 votes," he said. "You have 7. 5 remain undecided. When is the amendment scheduled?" "The morning after the reunion." Nathan returned the memo to its folder. If Celeste won the presidency during dinner, she would enter the board meeting with a public mandate. The reserve proposal might pass before anyone understood what was being surrendered. "Release the candidate records," Martin urged. "Let them see your name." "Not yet. You're running out of time." "I know." Nathan crossed to the endowment ledger resting inside its locked glass cabinet. 7 years of entries waited behind the doors. The emergency reserve, the restructuring plan, the matching gifts, and every decision Celeste had publicly praised without knowing who had made it possible. He could expose everything immediately. Instead, he asked Martin to prepare 2 items for the reunion night: the ledger and the original scholarship renewal memo from Nathan's student file. Martin studied him. "You're going to let her keep attacking you until the vote." Nathan's gaze rested on the worn copper pin reflected faintly in the cabinet glass. "If I reveal it now, she'll say, 'This is about winning.' And at the reunion," Nathan closed the cabinet curtain. "At the reunion, I'll ask them what they're willing to lose." 3 days later, Celeste used her donor circle authority to remove Nathan from the candidate's reception platform. His name remained on the ballot. His chair did not remain on the stage. When Martin called with the news, Nathan gave only one instruction: do not replace it. Because by then he understood that Celeste was no longer trying merely to defeat him. She was trying to make the entire academy watch him accept the place she had chosen for him. By reunion night, Celeste's insult had reached the room before Nathan did. She had told classmates that his name remained on the ballot only because Martin Hale felt sorry for him. She suggested Nathan had volunteered to help the service staff so he could attend without purchasing a donor ticket. By the time Celeste laughed at the copper pin and told the nearest tables he had returned to carry chairs, the story felt believable enough to entertain them. Then the board suite opened. Martin appeared with the endowment ledger in his arms, and Nathan walked toward him. Celeste followed. "Nathan," she called, keeping her tone light for the watching guests. "The candidates are expected at the head table." Nathan stopped beside the walnut doors. "There is no chair for me at the head table." A few guests glanced toward the stage. Celeste gave a sympathetic smile. "That was an administrative oversight." "No," Martin said. "It was a donor circle instruction." The smile vanished for only a moment. Celeste faced the room. "I asked that the seating reflect actual participation. Nathan hasn't attended a reunion committee meeting in 7 years. I was invited as a presidential candidate," Martin replied. "And he is still on the ballot." Her voice carried farther now. "That does not require us to pretend he has served this academy in the same way as people who have devoted years to it." Several donor circle members nodded. Nathan could have ended the argument with one sentence. He did not. The ballots would be distributed after the first course. He needed the room to understand the choice before it learned the secret behind it. Celeste moved closer. "You wanted them to see you as an outsider, Nathan." "Congratulations, they do." A classmate near the stage murmured her name in warning. She ignored him. "Did you tell them why you really avoid these events?" she continued. "Because you despise the people who helped you." Nathan's voice remained even. "That isn't true. You never thanked the donor circle. You never attended the scholarship dinners. You accepted everything this school gave you, then spent decades acting as if gratitude were beneath you." A donor lowered his phone. The words reached beyond Nathan. They landed on every former scholarship student in the hall, every person who had once entered the academy through a door someone else paid to open. Nathan touched the worn edge of the pin. "My mother wrote thank you letters every year," he said. Celeste hesitated. "She kept copies." Nathan continued. "She worried one missed letter might make the academy believe we had forgotten what the scholarship meant." Celeste's face hardened. "This is not about your mother. You made it about gratitude." For a moment, the advantage slipped from her. Then, the head of the donor circle, Richard Vale, approached, carrying a sealed ballot packet. Richard had supported Celeste for months. His family name appeared above the Academy Theater, and he believed traditions survived because certain families accepted responsibility for maintaining them. "We should proceed with dinner," he said. "Personal matters do not belong in the vote." Celeste recovered immediately. "I agree." Richard addressed Nathan. "Your concerns about the reserve amendment were circulated. The board understands your position. Does it understand the effect? The amendment is not tonight's business. It becomes tomorrow's business if the new president supports it. A restless murmur moved through the tables. Richard lowered his voice. This evening is meant to unite the alumni. Nathan studied the ballot packet. Unity around the wrong decision is still the wrong decision. Richard's jaw tightened. This is exactly why some members question whether you are suited to ceremonial leadership. I'm not asking for a ceremonial role. Celeste seized the opening. There she said to the room. Nathan has finally admitted it. He does not respect the position. He wants control of the fund. Nathan's expression did not change. She continued before anyone else could intervene. He built a career advising wealthy institutions, and now he wants access to ours. Yet he cannot produce one public record showing he has raised $1 for this academy. The accusation sounded precise because Celeste had shaped the rules around it. Anonymous service could not appear in his biography. Confidential donor work could not be cited without authorization. Every year, Nathan had protected the fund had been converted into emptiness on the printed page. Richard opened the packet. The ballots are ready. Martin's grip tightened around the ledger. Nathan could see the question in his face. Now, Nathan gave the slightest shake of his head. Not yet. The first course was served beneath a strained calm. Nathan sat at a small table near the west wall beside 2 retired teachers and an unused service cart. Celeste occupied the center seat on the stage. Throughout dinner, speakers praised legacy loyalty and visible service. Celeste smiled as photographs of scholarship students appeared on the screen behind her. Nathan recognized several names. He had approved the reserve model that kept each one enrolled. When Celeste rose to give her candidate remarks, applause met her before she reached the lectern. She spoke about preserving the Academy's greatness. She promised stronger donor traditions, larger alumni events, and a renovated hall that would reflect the standing of the institution. Then she glanced toward Nathan. Leadership requires presence, she said. It requires people who stand beside this community publicly, not advisors who appear only when they want authority. The audience understood whom she meant. Nathan's copper pin seemed darker beneath the stage lights. Celeste placed both hands on the lectern. I also believe scholarships should inspire responsibility. Assistance must never become entitlement. Nathan's chair scraped softly against the floor. Martin watched him rise. Celeste continued. The Academy should not guarantee renewal simply because a student received help once. Future support must consider loyalty, family engagement, and the ability to strengthen the institution after graduation. There it was, not merely a hall renovation. She wanted scholarship renewal tied to the future value of the family receiving it. Need would become investment potential. Gratitude would become a condition. Students like Nathan would have to prove they might someday repay the school socially, not simply honor the opportunity through their lives. Celeste smiled toward the largest donor table. We should invest in students who understand legacy. Nathan left his place by the wall. Every face followed him as he crossed the hall. Celeste watched him approach the stage. Do you object? She asked. Yes. The microphone carried the answer through the room. To which part? To measuring a child's worth by the donor they may become. A few people applauded. Celeste waited until the sound faded. And what would you know about preserving this fund? She asked. The question was deliberate. She believed he could not answer without appearing to exploit confidential work. She had pushed him into the exact corner she had designed. Nathan faced the alumni. I know the reserve should not be borrowed for this hall. I know renewal should remain based on academic standing and need. And I know 54 students are waiting for this board to decide whether a promise still means what it meant when it was made. Celeste gave a soft laugh. You speak as though those students belong to you. No, Nathan said. The obligation belongs to us. Richard Vale rose from the donor table. The candidates have both been heard. We should vote. Celeste reached for the ballot box. Nathan did not move. She leaned toward him, her voice low enough to feel private but clear enough for the front tables to catch. You cannot win this by reminding everyone you were once poor. Nathan's hand went still beside the copper pin. Martin began walking toward the stage. Celeste saw him and raised her voice. And bringing out an old scholarship file will not turn gratitude into qualification. Martin stopped. Until that moment, Nathan had planned to reveal only the fund structure. He had hoped the ledger could protect the students without forcing his mother's history into a public contest. Celeste had now made that impossible. She had taken the most sacred promise of his life, the scholarship that let his mother believe her son had a future, and reduced it to a weakness he was using for sympathy. Nathan faced Martin. "Release the donor ledger." The hall changed. Martin placed the leather-bound volume on the stage table. Celeste stared at it, then at Nathan. "What donor ledger?" "The one you tried to open in Martin's office," he said. A voice from the board suite interrupted before she could respond. "Mr. Hale, the confidential authorization has been verified." A board officer entered carrying a sealed academy envelope. Martin opened the ledger to the page marked by the blue ribbon. Rows of dates, reserves amounts, strategy decisions, and confidential initials filled the paper. Richard leaned forward. Celeste's confidence held until Martin placed the sealed envelope beside the book. Then she noticed the initials repeated down 7 years of entries. NP. Nathan rested one hand beside the open page. Before anyone votes, he said they should know whose service was removed from the record. For the first time that evening, Celeste had no prepared answer. And beneath the stage lights, Martin began reading the first entry aloud. Martin Hale adjusted his glasses and read from the ledger. November 14th. Emergency Scholarship Reserve established through an anonymous contribution of $3.2 million. Strategic Advisor N.P. A few guests leaned forward. Celeste remained beside the lectern, one hand resting on the ballot box. "That proves nothing," she said. "Nathan's initials are hardly unique." Martin continued. December 2nd. Advisor declined naming rights and requested that all public credit remain with the Academy Scholarship Initiative. Nathan watched the donor tables rather than Celeste. Some of the same people who had laughed at his service jacket were now trying to remember every scholarship campaign they had publicly celebrated. Celeste gave a dismissive wave. "So he made one contribution years ago. Generous, perhaps. But generosity does not make someone president." "You're right," Nathan said. The answer unsettled her more than an argument would have. Martin moved down the page. January 17th. Advisor identified overlapping management fees and negotiated a consolidated investment structure. Projected annual savings $412,000. A retired trustee near the stage rose halfway from his chair. "I was on the finance committee that year," he said. "We were told the proposal came from an outside specialist." "It did," Martin replied. He indicated Nathan. The trustee slowly sat again. Celeste's fingers curled around the edge of the lectern. "Consultants are paid to make recommendations." "I was not paid," Nathan said. Martin confirmed it. Mr. Price refused compensation. Richard Vale came closer to the ledger. "What else is recorded?" Martin read the entries in order. Nathan had designed the protected renewal reserve. Nathan had renegotiated the Academy's fee agreements. Nathan had created the matching structure that attracted 3 major alumni gifts. Nathan had drafted the rule requiring every future capital campaign to reserve a percentage for tuition assistance. The facts landed without drama that made them harder to dismiss. For 7 years, the Academy had announced record scholarship stability. Celeste had repeated those figures in speeches, donor letters, and magazine interviews. She had built her reputation around a recovery plan created by the man she had just described as absent. A former class officer opened the reunion program and found Celeste's candidate statement. "You wrote that you helped develop the scholarship protection model," he said. "I helped promote it." "That isn't what this says." Celeste's voice sharpened. "Fundraising requires public communication. Nathan may have advised Martin, but people like me gave the work visibility." Nathan finally faced her. "You gave yourself visibility." A few heads lowered. Celeste pointed toward the ledger. "This is confidential donor information. Martin had no right to use it during an election." Martin placed the sealed envelope beside the open pages. "He has authorization." Celeste stared at Nathan. "You released it tonight." "Yes. To win a vote. To stop you from changing what the money was meant to protect." She laughed, but no one joined her. "You could have disclosed this weeks ago." "I could have." "Then why didn't you?" Nathan glanced across the hall at the projected photographs of scholarship students still frozen on the screen behind the stage. "Because the policy should have been enough." The room held still. "I wanted the board to reject the amendment because borrowing scholarship money was wrong," he continued. I wanted the voters to reject loyalty tests because students are not future donors under review. I did not want my name to become the reason anyone kept a promise they had already made. Richard studied the ledger. And now my silence is being used to help break that promise. Celeste stepped away from the lectern. This is emotional theater. Nathan's expression remained controlled. No, the ledger is the financial record. He nodded to Martin. The emotional record is next. Martin opened the academy envelope and removed a single yellowed memorandum. The paper had been preserved inside Nathan's student file for nearly 4 decades. Its type was faded and one corner carried the faint imprint of a rusted paper clip. Martin read the heading. Scholarship Renewal Determination. Student Nathan Price. Celeste's face tightened. Nathan could have taken the memorandum himself. Instead, he let Martin read the first lines. The Academy had reviewed Nathan's academic standing and his family's financial hardship after his mother's illness. His tuition assistance would continue through graduation. Martin paused before the final sentence. Nathan knew every word. He had carried them home in a paper envelope. He had watched his mother read them at the kitchen table. He had seen relief arrive in her body so suddenly that she could no longer stand. Martin finished. The Academy's commitment to a qualified student shall not be withdrawn because a family's hardship has deepened. No one applauded. The silence was too honest for that. Nathan took the old memo and placed it beside the new renewal list Martin had brought from the board suite. 54 students. The language changed over the years, Nathan said. The obligation did not. He lifted the new memorandum. Every student on this list met the academic standard. Every family demonstrated need. Celeste's proposal would allow other factors to influence whether their support continues. Celeste shook her head. That is a distortion. I said loyalty and engagement should matter. For children. For families receiving extraordinary assistance. Nathan's voice dropped. My mother cleaned offices at night. She missed alumni dinners because she was working. Under your standard, would that have counted as insufficient engagement? Celeste opened her mouth. Nothing came. Nathan continued. She never became a donor. Her name is not on a building. But the opportunity she protected produced 7 years of work that kept this fund alive. Richard Vale closed Celeste's campaign brochure. One of her promised supporters crossed his name off a ballot. Then another did the same. Celeste saw it happening. This vote is being manipulated, she said. Nathan concealed material information until the final moment. I concealed my identity, Nathan replied. The fund's performance was published every year. You let me promote it without correcting me. You promoted students whose names you did not know and work you did not understand. Her composure cracked. I brought millions into this academy, and how much of it could be used for scholarships? The question stopped her. Several of Celeste's largest announced gifts had been restricted to receptions, renovations, plaques, and alumni programming. The totals sounded impressive, but only a small portion reached tuition assistance. Nathan opened the ledger to a summary page. Your donor circle raised $11 million over 5 years, he said. Less than $900,000 was available for student aid. Celeste's cheeks flushed. Donors choose where their money goes. Yes, and leadership tells them what matters. Richard Vale removed the sealed ballots from the packet. Before distributing them, he addressed Martin. Was Nathan Price formally nominated according to Academy rules? Yes. Was his service verified by the required officers? Yes. Did he request that his identity remain confidential until tonight? Martin glanced toward Nathan. He requested confidentiality indefinitely. He released it only after the reserve and renewal protections were publicly challenged. Richard faced the alumni representatives. I withdraw my support for Celeste Price. A murmur spread across the hall. Celeste's voice rose. Richard, this cannot be decided in reaction to one performance. It is being decided in reaction to 7 years of records. 2 donor circle members left the stage. Celeste moved toward Nathan. You planned this humiliation. I did not retreat. I asked you privately to protect the fund. You never asked me. I showed you the amendment. You challenged me in front of the candidates. I challenged the policy. She searched his face for anger, perhaps because anger would let her call this revenge. She found none. That frightened her. Martin distributed the ballots. The vote took less than 5 minutes. Nathan received 16. Celeste received 6. 2 representatives abstained. When Richard announced the result, applause rose from the back of the hall and rolled toward the stage. Nathan did not smile. I took the microphone only after the noise began to fade. The first decision of this presidency will not concern a reunion, a building, or a donor title, he said. Tomorrow morning, I will ask the board to reject the reserve amendment and reaffirm need-based scholarship renewal. The applause returned louder. Celeste stood alone beside the unused ballot box. Martin approached Richard and spoke quietly. Richard listened, then addressed the donor circle officers. Because Celeste had misrepresented her role in developing the scholarship model, the circle would open an immediate review of her public statements. Her chair privileges were suspended pending that review, and she would no longer represent the group at the next morning's board session. The consequence was not dramatic. No security guard removed her. No one demanded that she leave. Instead, the people who had once gathered around her began creating distance. A trustee collected the candidate brochures from the stage. A photographer lowered his camera. One of Celeste's closest supporters quietly removed her name card from the head table. Public standing disappeared more softly than it was built. Nathan closed the ledger. Then he removed the copper pin from his service jacket. Celeste watched, perhaps expecting him to display it like a trophy. He carried it to the front row where 8 current scholarship students had been invited as reunion guests. A 17-year-old girl named Maya Ellis sat at the aisle. Her mother worked in a hospital laundry, and the latest renewal memo had guaranteed Maya's final year at the academy. Nathan placed the pin in her palm. This belonged to students who entered before the doors opened easily, he said. Keep it until another student needs to know they belong here. Maya closed her fingers around it. The hall rose again. Nathan lifted one hand and redirected the attention toward the students. Not for me, he said. For them. One by one, the scholarship students stood. The applause changed direction. Celeste remained beneath the chandeliers, surrounded by the plaques and names she had mistaken for legacy. And for the first time that night, the room understood the difference between being seen beside an institution and quietly making certain its doors remained open. The board rejected the reserve amendment the next morning. The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Scholarship assets would remain protected from construction loans, and renewal decisions would continue to rest on academic standing and demonstrated need. The board also added a new requirement every major alumni campaign had to state in plain language how much money would reach students directly. Nathan's first act as alumni president was not to sit for a portrait. He asked Martin Hale to bring the 54 renewal memos into the board suite. Together, they signed the final authorization. By noon, the envelopes were carried to the academy mailroom. Several students received digital confirmation before their families had finished lunch. Maya Ellis called her mother from the library steps. She did not know Nathan was walking past when she said, "I get to stay." Her mother's answer came through the phone as a sound too full of relief to become words. Nathan kept walking. That was the kind of recognition he trusted. The donor circle completed its review 3 weeks later. Celeste was removed as chair after the committee determined that several of her speeches had overstated her role in developing the scholarship recovery plan. She remained an alumna and kept the right to attend public events, but she lost access to private strategy meetings and could no longer approve donor circle communications. There was no dramatic announcement. A short notice appeared at the bottom of the alumni newsletter. Her name disappeared from the committee page. Invitations that once arrived automatically stopped coming. People who had admired her confidence began describing it as ambition. Nathan took no pleasure in that change. He understood how easily a room could reverse its judgment without examining its own behavior. The same classmates who had laughed at his service jacket now told him they had always suspected there was more to him. He did not challenge them. He simply stopped allowing them to confuse regret with courage. At his first alumni meeting, Nathan removed the reserved chair from the center of the stage and placed it among the others. He kept the agenda brief. The Academy would create a permanent student aid advisory panel with 2 current scholarship students, 1 parent, 1 teacher, and 3 alumni. Endowment summaries would be written in language families could understand. No fundraising campaign would use student stories without permission, and no candidate for alumni office could erase another person's verified service from the record by labeling it insufficiently public. Martin listened from the back row. His retirement became official at the end of the semester. The academy offered to name the board suite after him, but he declined. Instead, he asked that the records room beneath the library be renovated and converted into a scholarship resource office. Nathan approved the request. The old metal desk remained. So did the locked cabinet that had once held the ledger. 6 months after the reunion, Nathan visited the office on a rainy afternoon. Students sat at 2 tables completing financial aid forms while a counselor explained renewal requirements to a father in work boots. Nothing in the room bore Nathan's name. That suited him. Maya found him near the doorway. She was wearing the copper pin on her blazer. The metal had been cleaned, though the worn edges remained dark. "I almost polished all of it," she said. "Then I thought maybe it was supposed to look used." "It is." She touched the tiny letters beneath the academy crest. SF still means scholarship fund. "It does." Maya nodded toward the students at the tables. "Martin told me you wore it under your coat for years." Nathan smiled faintly. "Martin is enjoying retirement too much." "Why did you hide it?" The question was simple. Nathan considered giving her the answer he had given reporters, that the work mattered more than the person behind it. That answer was true, but incomplete. "Because I thought staying invisible would protect the work," he said. Sometimes it did, and sometimes it made it easier for other people to decide what the work meant. Maya studied the pin. "Should I give it back?" "No." "When do I pass it on?" Nathan glanced across the room. A new student sat beside his grandmother, gripping a financial aid form with both hands. He had the same guarded expression Nathan remembered wearing at 17, the look of someone trying not to hope until the promise was certain. "You'll know," Nathan said. That winter, the academy published its annual endowment report. For the first time, the opening pages did not feature a photograph of a donor or a new building. They showed the scholarship renewal rate, the reserve balance, and letters from families whose children had remained enrolled. Nathan's name appeared once in a small line listing the alumni president. Celeste's appeared nowhere. She attended the following reunion quietly and left before dinner. Near the entrance, she passed Nathan beside the coat room. For a moment, neither spoke. Then her eyes moved to his empty lapel. "You gave it away," she said. "Yes." She waited, perhaps expecting accusation or forgiveness. Nathan offered neither. "The pin was never proof that I belonged," he said. "It was proof that someone kept a promise." Celeste lowered her gaze. Nathan walked back into the hall. The renovated room looked almost the same as it had the year before. The chandeliers still shone. The donor plaques still covered the walls. But along the west side, where his small table had once been placed beside a service cart, the academy had installed a permanent display. It held no portrait, only a copy of the old scholarship renewal memo opened to one sentence. "The academy's commitment to a qualified student shall not be withdrawn because a family's hardship has deepened." Below it sat an empty space reserved for the copper pin. Nathan stood before the display until Maya arrived with the new student from the resource office. She removed the pin from her blazer and fastened it to his. The boy touched it carefully. No cameras flashed. No one announced the moment from the stage. Across the hall, dinner continued while one student quietly told another that the door would remain open. Nathan watched them walk away, then joined Martin near the back of the room. This time, when the applause began for the scholarship class, no one mistook the people standing beneath the lights for the people who had made the promise matter. Legacy was not the name engraved on the building. It was the person who could enter, because someone refused to close the door. And reputation, no matter how polished, could never replace that. Do you believe true service should remain private, or should people step forward when silence allows others to rewrite the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories about quiet dignity, earned justice, and the people whose worth is revealed when the record is finally opened.